Welcome, everyone, to the Week 11 Player Prop Happy Hour presented by the 33rd Team. I'm your host, as always, Josh Larky, joined, as always, by my co-hosts, Ryan Reynolds and Ben Wolbransky. Today, we're going to be going over 9 player prop bets in 15 minutes. We've each brought 3 to the table. Let's get right into it. Ryan, your first play of the day.
I'm going to take Dak Prescott over 258.5 passing yards at minus 114 on FanDuel. Dallas has become very pass-centric over the last month. Dak has beaten this number in 4 straight and by a wide margin in each of his last 3 games. 5-4 on the year on this line. One of those games came against San Francisco, so we could throw that one out in this instance. The other one came against the Giants on opening day, which brings me to my chief concern here. Defensive touchdowns for Dallas are a path to this failing. Carolina not pushing them at all are a path to this failing. Defensive scores, blowout, definitely on the table here. I bet on Dak to win the MVP at 40-1 earlier this week. You can get him at slight value on FanDuel in this matchup.
I like that play. I would say that all MVP bets, unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, probably got a little bit better this week out of players not named Joe Burrow after it was announced 30 minutes ago that he is out for the season. We lost Joe Burrow. We lost Mark Andrews, but we have Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. Check him out. His survivor picks, what he's betting on in each and every game, picks and predictions. It's all on the33rdteam.com. Ben, what's your first bet of the day?
Ryan to win MVP is my first bet of the day. So thank you for all you do, Ryan. No, my first bet of the day is going to be Sam LaPorta over 44.5 receiving yards. I grabbed this at minus 105 in DraftKings, and I put it in 33rd Team Discord saying this line is going to move. It did move. The best you can get right now is 46.5 on FanDuel. I'll still take that, but 44.5. LaPorta 6-3 on this line. He's averaging 53 yards per game, which is nearly 10 more yards higher than the line. And I like this line for a few reasons. The first being that the Bears are running the highest rate of cover 2 in the entire NFL. And Sam LaPorta leads all relevant tight ends with a target on 42% of his routes against cover 2, not to mention 41% target share on in cover 2. And in the games where he's seen at least 4 routes versus cover 2, he's 3-2 on this line. But in one of those games, he saw 11 targets. And in one of those losses, the other loss, he saw 5 receptions. So we know that the volume is going to be there. And as he's emerged as one of the best tight ends in the NFL, I think we can count on the efficiency to be there. 2, especially when you consider that the Bears are also running, and statistically, he's most likely to see cover 3. They're running the 13th highest rate of that. And LaPorta ranks 4th among relevant tight ends with 2.4 yards per route run against cover 3. So between the combination of cover 3 and cover 2 that LaPorta is due to see here, he's been really good against it all season long. And then just given some of his usage and performance, I really like the value. 44.5, extremely beatable. 46.5, not bad either.
I like that. That is Ben Wolbransky on Twitter. He is our data scientist. His projections go up on the 33rd Team midweek every single week. You get his full projections and you get his thoughts as to some of the players that he's really a little higher on, lower on, and some context to explain that numbers process. My first bet of the day, we're going to fast forward to Monday night. I'm taking DeAndre Swift over 13.5 rush attempts, minus 105 on DraftKings. Ryan and I have talked about DeAndre Swift multiple times this week. This is DeAndre Swift week. He didn't really play in week 1. Since then, he's been 7-1 on the over 13.5, averaging 17 carries a game during that span. I really like this, not just because Swift has been beating this line consistently, but the Chiefs are a run funnel defense. Running back rooms have averaged 19 carries a game against the Chiefs, so they're still running a little bit, even though they're often trailing. Swift's averaged 3 times as many carries as anyone else in the backfield since week 2. The Chiefs give up the 3rd lowest yards per attempt to opposing quarterbacks, yet the 2nd highest yards per carry to opposing running backs. I think they're going to lean on Swift heavily. I also like him over 58.5 rushing yards, but I thought the attempts was just a little bit safer to play the usage rather than the results. Ryan, your second bet of the day.
DK Metcalf over 61.5 receiving yards, minus 115 on DraftKings. He's beaten this in 5 of 8 games this season, has at least 9 targets in 3 of his last 4 games. Catch rate's been really low. I like to bet on regression in those types of situations. I'm going to play this game in DFS as well, so I might actually end up playing this in a same game parlay with the Rams on the other side as well. My only concern here is Geno Smith hasn't been that good this season. He's been a little bit volatile. I do think this is a good spot against the Rams defense. So.
I like that call as well. Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. Make sure you're checking out all his work. Make sure that you're in the free 33rd Team Discord. Interact with all three of us. Start sits, trade questions out of your trade deadlines. We post other prop bets throughout the week in there. And you get DFS advice from Jordan Bannock. Ben, your second bet of the day.
My second pick of the day is another tight end prop. Dalton Kincaid's longest reception under 18.5, minus 110 on DraftKings. And if you're listening, you're thinking that is not a sexy bet. I do not want to bet that. And I get that, right? Kincaid's been awesome this season. But he's had 45 receptions, and only 2 of them have been longer than 18.5 yards. That is fewer than 5%. So let's assume independence on all of Kincaid's receptions, statistical independence, pick them at random. That means that he needs 12 receptions for this line to be fair value. Wow. Now, granted, we know that this isn't statistically independent. We know that this isn't random. 2 of those 2 receptions came in the last 3 games, and that corresponds with Knox's injury. That's relevant data, right? That's still 2 receptions of 19 or more in his last 20 receptions. That's 10%. Means fair value is 6 receptions, and Kincaid's only had 6 receptions just twice this season. So statistically, this is not a good bet for Kincaid. Now, you can look at the other side of the ball. Take a look at the Jets defense. They've allowed the fewest receptions of 19 or more to the tight end position the whole season. And not just that, Kincaid's not really used like a tight end. They've allowed the fewest receptions of 19 or more, period. Tight ends, wide receivers, you name it. They're giving up 2 receptions per game of 19 or more. That is the fewest in the NFL. So my big concern here comes with how Kincaid is going to be used with this new offensive scheme. That should be your only concern here too. A little bit of risk, but on the 2 tight end receptions that the Jets have allowed this season, one was to Noah Gray when Jordan Whitehead totally misread the covered Travis Kelce instead. And the other was a 54-yard bomb to Pharaoh Brown on a go route, which I think Kincaid's only ran 18 of those on the season. The Jets defense is good enough where, they're a top 5 unit, and it shouldn't matter how much Kincaid gets involved. I think the Jets will be able to keep him in check.
I hope for our sake they will as well. I'll be tailing that bet. Make sure you're following our data scientist, Ben Wolby, at Ben Wolby on Twitter. My second bet, this is the one that scares me the most. It's an under. Taking Rachaad White under 44.5 rushing yards. Minus 105 on DraftKings. Now, that's a very, very low line. A very low line for a running back who's had 20 carries in each of the past 2 weeks. But as everything is in football, we have other variables to bring in. The past 2 weeks, they faced the Titans and the Texans. Those were games that were always a relatively favorable game script to keep running the ball. Before that, he only carried 9 times for 39 yards against the Buffalo Bills. Game before that, 13 carries for 34 yards against Atlanta. Game before that, 7 carries for 26 yards against Detroit. Earlier this year, Rachaad White faced the Eagles. That's probably a comparable type defense to the 49ers right now. He had 14 carries for just 38 yards. I think we should probably expect something between the 9 for 39 against Buffalo and the 14 for 38 against the Eagles. The Buccaneers are 12-point underdogs against the 49ers. The Niners now have the best defensive front in football. They've added Chase Young. Ryan can always speak more on that with how he watches the games, but I certainly would not want to bet on any running backs facing the Niners the rest of this season, particularly when they're 12-point underdogs. I think if you want to take a Rachaad White over, something with his receiving potentially, but I think rushing at this point is kind of off limits. Ryan, I see you nodding your head. Do you want to talk a little bit before you give your third bet about just how nasty this 49ers front looks right now?
Yeah, no, from a pass rushing standpoint, they shouldn't have been allowed to acquire Chase Young. And like you said, I agree completely with your stance here from a game script standpoint. They're not an effective run offense to begin with. Terrible matchup, probably playing from behind. I love both of your last 2 bets, actually.
I like it. Ryan, why don't you give us your third bet of the day? And before that, for anyone out there who likes the way Ryan talks, it's because he watches every snap of every game. He's done it since 2014. Nobody knows football. Nobody talks about football the way that Ryan Reynolds does. What's your third and final bet of the day?
I'm definitely a sick maniac, ladies and gentlemen. Next up, Trevor Lawrence, over 241.5 passing yards, minus 115 on DraftKings. I'll also play some Lawrence in DFS this week, like him coming off a blowout loss against the 49ers that we just discussed. Throw out games against the 49ers defense for the most part, statistically for me. Titans are giving up 14th most passing yards per game this season, but they've also played Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, the Colts, and Lamar Jackson, who does not throw for a lot of passing yards, even though he's an excellent player. Baker Mayfield went over this number. Justin Herbert went way over this number. Again, when you're playing the Tennessee Titans, if you can handle their pass rush, you can shred their secondary. I think this is a very manageable number. I think Lawrence could go way over this number potentially.
I looked at this and took it last night as well. So when I saw that you were also on this, that made me feel pretty good. We actually talked, was it Thursday or Monday, where we said, I think it was on Monday, where we said, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be pretty heavily rotated in our DFS player pool, banking on a bounce back against the Titans. I like it. Ben, your third and final bet of the day.
Not a tight end prop. I'm taking Aaron Jones's longest rush under 13.5, minus 115 on DraftKings. Very simply put, he has not had a single rush of 14 or more this season. Over the past 2 weeks, he's seen the most work he's seen all season. He's seen 20 carries and then 13 carries, but his longest rush over those 33 carries, just 9 yards. Pretty confidently under that 13.5, right? So if that doesn't bode well for Jones, teams are also passing the ball at the 6th highest rate against the Chargers. They're averaging 38 attempts per game. That is a number that is the 3rd most. I know, Josh, you want to talk a little bit more about this Chargers run defense, but what's more is only 3.2% of running back rushes against the Chargers have been 14 or more yards. That's a rate that's the 8th fewest in the league. We did see Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery have massive weeks last week, and both were able to top this number. But 2 offenses using their running backs completely differently than how the Green Bay Packers are doing. So I actually really like Aaron Jones a lot. I've been advocating for him a lot in fantasy football, saying that he's a great buy low. But when you have an opportunity to bet 50-50 prices for a player who's never done something all season long, and the opponent's only allowed running backs to do it on 4% of their attempts, I feel like this is a mispriced line. There's got to be some plus EV there. So I'm taking the under pretty happily here.
I love that description. Folks, nobody talks about football like Ben Wolby either. The way that he blends data science, logic, the outfits that he wears on the live stream. We like all of it. Before I get to my final prop of the day, if you want some of my work, my fantasy rankings, rest of season rankings are always on the33rdteam.com each and every week, along with player write-ups for context in both of those. After the show, Ryan and I are going to discuss the injury fallout of Joe Burrow. Mark Andrews will have an article out shortly for each of those guys in terms of what do we do at the tight end position? How do we handle Ravens moving forward? And then what do we do with all of these Bengals? We need a few quarterback streaming options for everyone that lost Burrow. Speaking of quarterbacks and speaking of the Packers, we're going to stick with that game and play the passing side of the Packers offense. I'm going to take Jordan Love over 19.5 completions, minus 115 on DraftKings. To begin with, he's 6-3 on this number. He's been 4-0 his past 4 games. He was incredibly inaccurate early in the season. His completion percentage was in the 50s. It's starting to slowly tick back up a little bit, and his passing volume has increased. And then he faces the Chargers. All 9 teams that faced the Chargers this year completed at least 20 passes. They are 9-0 to the over. I don't like Jordan Love. The path to this failing is Jordan Love, but the matchup couldn't be better. Love himself usually has hit this, so we're going to go with Jordan Love over 19.5 completions. Folks, you just got 9 player prop bets in 15 minutes from myself, Josh Larky, from Ryan Reynolds, from Ben Wolby, from the 33rd team. Thank you, everyone.